Howdy, what's up? It's Ryan from Art and Music. How's it going? Awesome. That's what I want to hear. Okay, I'm going to give you a short, well, I don't know if it'll be short. I'm going to give you a simple guitar lesson. How about that? Simple. Super simple. And we're talking about improvising little guitar solos. You know, simple melodies. And a lot of people kind of don't know what to do or don't know where to get started. There's a lot of things you can do, but where do you get started? Obviously, the first thing to do is you need to learn a couple of scales. We do 12-bar blues things quite a bit because that's a really easier way to start improvising over the blues. And of course that is the basis of rock music if you're into rock, but also country. Gets a lot of its roots from the blues, so it's a good thing to kind of take a look at. So most people will learn, you know, their pentatonic scale. We're going to do A minor pentatonic. First position, most people kind of know that position. If you don't, go check out the videos right here where you can review that scale. And we're going to use that over 12-bar blues in A progression. Now 12-bar blues in A, 12 measures. Typical progression is A, 7, D7, back to A, to D, back to A, E7, D7, A7, ends on the E7. Right? Basic 12-bar blues. So if we're playing an A progression, A blues, we're going to use this A pentatonic scale or A blues scale over it. And sometimes people think that's enough, right? If you're using the right scale over the right chord progression, that'll get you where you need to go. And that's a really good start. Don't get me wrong, it is. About 70% of the time, you can kind of hit a random note in this scale and it's going to sound good over this progression, or acceptable anyways. That's pretty good odds, you know. However, there's the other 30% of the time that you might hit a note from the scale and it's not going to sound quite right against the progression in the background. So how do you figure out, you know, if you want to go from 70% of the time hitting a good note to 100% of the time hitting a good note, how do you do that? I'm glad you asked. We're going to cover that. Step 1, use the scale that correlates or corresponds to the key we're in. We're doing an A blues progression, 12-bar blues, an A minor or an A blues scale. We'll work over that progression most of the time. But we want it to work all the time. So how do we do that? It'd be great if you knew the names of every note in this scale. And you should learn that. That would be a good thing to learn. But that can be a lot of information overload. So start off with the important notes. Well, we're playing A blues using an A minor or A blues scale. So start off with finding the A's in the scale. Where is an A? Well, the first note of the scale, 5th fret, 6th string. There's an A. You have 4th string, 7th fret. Is the other A. And then of course 1st string, 5th fret. The final A. So you have 3 A's in this scale. Awesome. Most people can remember that. You have the root note of the chord. A7 chord. A root note. Excellent. Start with the A's. Now after that, we only have 2 other chords to worry about in our progression. We have a D or D7. So, knowing where the D's are in this progression is good. We have a 5th string, 5th fret. There's the other, a D. And then we have the octave, 3rd string, 7th fret. 2 Ds to worry about. Okay. Last chord of the progression is an E7. So knowing where the E's are in this scale pattern would be important. 7th fret, 5th string. There's that E, 7th fret, 5th string. And then 2nd string, 5th fret, your other E. Okay, so 3 chords in the progression, 3 root notes to remember. The A's, D's, and the E's. It's a good idea to be familiar with the background chords and the background changes. That's a pretty key element here. So once you're familiar with that, the next basic thing is to make sure you're hitting those root notes. Okay, this is simple. This is a simple approach. So if we have an A7 chord, you know, the first chord of the progression. Okay, so if you have a lick that emphasizes that A root note, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be really simple. A simple lick, right? I'm starting 3rd string, 5th fret. 4th string, 7th fret. 4th string, 5th fret. Five, 7, 5, 7. Right? So that's our lick. We're going to call that our lick. It emphasizes that A. Because we land on that note, we're emphasizing it. We're passing through it, then we land on it. So we're going to call that a lick that's bass around an A target note, or a lick, an A lick. So if you have an A chord going on, a lick that emphasizes that A note is going to sound pretty sweet. It's going to work. So come up with some licks that can be really simple. They don't have to be complicated, but you know where you're landing. Okay. Next, the next chord of the progression is that D7. So you might want to have a lick that emphasizes or targets the D note. I would go 3rd string, 3rd string, 7th fret, D. That D would be great. Now you have 2 choices. With that 3rd string D, which is right next to your 4th string A. They're very close together, so that's a great one. So a good D lick. We'll slip into the A minor blues. We'll slip into that flat 5, the blue note on the 3rd string, 8th fret. You could bend it. I like the slide though. That's a good way to incorporate some bluesiness into this lick. calling it a D lick because it's emphasizing that D note, starting on a D, ending on a D. So if you hit a target note of the chord on top of that chord, get a D7 chord, play a lick that emphasizes a D note, it's going to work. It's not going to clash. Okay? So you need to write some simple licks that you can play kind of at will whenever. You don't have to overthink them. You know, get them in your muscle memory. Some simple ones are a great place to start. So there was my A lick. There's my D lick. Make sense? Good. So A7 chord. An A lick is going to sound good over that. D7. D lick is going to sound good over that D7 chord. Back to an A7. You want another lick that emphasizes an A. Doesn't matter, could be this A, that A, that A. Just one of those A's. It's a classic one. Bend up to this first string A from your second string 8th fret. You're hitting an A. Works every time. That brings us to our E7. So you want to have a lick, again, as you might be imagining, that emphasizes an E. There's 2 E's in this pentatonic scale. So you want to have some kind of lick that you can play over this E7 chord that emphasizes that E. You can start with really short, simple licks. You don't have to do some fancy thing. Goes back to a D. To an A. To an E again. So there's the basics of it. Whatever chord you have going on in the background, the lick that you're going to play on top of that chord, or the melody you're going to play on top of that chord, if you'll emphasize the note that goes with that chord, if it's A7, hit an A note, end the scale. D7, hit a D. Doesn't matter what the lick is, just hit a D. E7. That's a classy one. Bend up to an E. Over an E. To a D7. There you go. Now that's the simplest way to go about playing a little lead over a chord progression, and knowing pretty 99.9% certain it's going to sound all right. You're not going to hit any crap notes because the notes you're aiming for correspond to the chord in the background. Alright, now that's the simple way. Yes, you're using the scale that goes with the key, but you are targeting chord tones in your licks. Okay? Alright, that's the simple version. You could be a little bit more advanced, right, if you want to, because, for example, you have an A lick, right? Right? Obviously it works over an A chord. Okay? Now the more advanced thought process would be, you know, over a D chord, that same A lick is going to sound good. You're probably thinking, Ryan, you said play a D lick over a D chord. I did say that. But the trick here is a D chord has got more than one note in it. Yes, it has D's in it, but the fifth of a D chord or a D7 chord is an A. So A is an integral part of a D chord. It's one of the most important tones after the root. So you could actually put your A licks over D chords too, because A is part of a D chord. Yeah. You could put your E lick over the A. You know why? Because an A7, one of the really important notes of an A7 chord is an E. So if you played an E lick on top of an A chord, that would work too. All right? So playing a lick that emphasizes the root note of the chord, an A lick for an A chord, a D lick for a D chord, an E lick for an E chord, is the basic place to start. Start there. But after that, once you learn your chord tones and what notes are in each one of these chords, you could target one of the other notes of that chord and your lick is still going to work out. But don't worry about that right now. Start simple. Keep it simple. You can never go wrong if you keep it simple. All right. Now, a nice way to do this, I like to find, if you don't have a loop pedal or you don't have a backing track or whatever, play the chord of the progression, A7. D comes next. Back to an A. To a D. To an A. E. To a D. To an A. To an E. Play the chord, play a lick that works with that chord. That's how you can practice it by yourself if you don't have a loop pedal or a backing track or whatever. That's a good way to do it. Play the chord, play a lick that coincides with that or corresponds to that chord. All right? I hope that was helpful. This isn't the only way to do it. This is just kind of a really simple way to get started. Get started. So, give that a shot, play around with it, and let me know what you think. All right, any questions, leave me a comment. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and tell me that you liked it. If you would like more detailed, tips on this, request that, and maybe I'll make another video. And thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the views. Keep the music alive.